Hey guys, hold on a minute. Alright, sorry about that. This is the first time I've done this. Hopefully the stream is fine. This is the first time I've done it on YouTube. I have a new phone. I actually went up to new technology. Anyhow. If it wasn't for my subscribers, I wouldn't be able to do this. I have 1,100 subscribers and I have 1,000 to be able to do this. So I appreciate all my subscribers. I'm sorry I've been gone for 3 years. There's a lot of shit that's happened in 3 years, but I'll do that in another video. Anyhow, this video may trigger people that have been sexually abused or abused themselves. If you feel this video will trigger you with the the images and some of the talk I will be going into is a little graphic. So if you don't feel you can handle that, please don't watch this. Also, this live stream is probably going to be an hour at least for me talking about the sexual abuse. I'm doing this also because I see only about when you type in sexual abuse stories, about 95% or more is just about females talking about their sexual abuse. Males get sexually abused also. It's not reported enough. And also, there are hardly any views on there about men getting sexually abused. And of course, here it goes again with poor connection. Well, I have my phone plugged in, so I don't know why it's doing that. So hopefully this isn't messing it up. So I'm gonna start my story. Now, I was abused 6 to 14 years of age. Now, when I tell this story, I'm probably gonna bounce around a little bit. I may stop to pause to get myself together. I may or may not cry. I've cried a lot of times going over this stuff with my therapist. So, anyhow, I was sexually abused from 6 to 14. It started out when I was 6. He would just, fill me up, molest me that way, technical, stuff like that. And my grandfather was a very rich man, before I start that out. He was, in Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, when they had that big, Ford plant. He was actually the president of that Ford branch. So he had tons of money. And he would always carry around big stacks of hundreds like this. I'm not kidding. And, so the first time he sexually molested me, he said basically, it was love and that's how you show love. I didn't have no pain to it, I was just confused. And that's the first time he gave me $100 bill. So every time he gave me text message. Sorry about that. Every time he gave that to me, it was when he abused me or sexually molested me. So, when I turned 7 was the first time that he penetrated me. I was 7 years old, and he took me to my room, which, to speak of, before this happened, my mom and dad were divorced at 2. I was 2 when they divorced. And the only way my dad never found out about this, I'll talk more about my dad later in the video here, is that he was drugged up. He would always, my grandfather and grandmother, my grandma was on it too. She knew about it. She actually watched it happen a lot of times. But my father, he would always send my dad out before he would do anything to me. And he had a special room for me called my room. I can still remember the layout of the house today, which isn't uncommon. But anyhow, it was down a hallway. My bedroom was on the left. The bathroom was on the white. And then you go down. They had 2 bathrooms. And then you go straight. That was the other bathroom. And then my dad's room was on the left. The room was on the right. I just remember that hallway. So, anyhow, he took me in his special room and threw me down and told me to bend over and pull down my pants. So, I was confused, so I did. And he didn't use any lubrication, nothing. So he then went ahead and penetrated me for the first time and kept going till, he got off. Of course, there was blood, and the first time that I actually showed, like, I used to cut, and I'll do that in another video. That's part of the reason why I cutted, because when I cut, I saw the blood, and I knew it was over the angle, and that's how it was when he had sex with me. When I saw the blood going down my leg, he would stop. And you're probably wondering, well, how could this go unnoticed? My grandfather, for all the penetration, the sex videos, the sex acts, my mom wasn't really rich, she didn't have much, so my grandfather offered to take me, to doctors. Now, my grandfather had all the doctors paid off. They would look at me and they would say, "Oh, you just have a bad colon, it's just wet because of a fissure, or you had a hard bowel movement." So every time, like I said, he would penetrate me, he would give me $100. And this went on for many years. When I would gel a little bit when I was 7 to 9, so for 3 years he would do it in the bathtub. He would sit down behind me and I would be in the bathtub with him, and he would do it to me in the bathtub and push my head down in the water where I could not scream, because if I screamed from him, I choke on the water. There was a lot of times I choked, but that's what he did. And there was recalls that I remember him having parties in Virginia. Well, this took place in Virginia. He was a smart man, by the way. He had sex acts with me in 3 different states. So we'll talk about that later. So he would have parties for the kids in the neighborhood. And every once in a while, he would take a kid out, take them inside the house. About 15 minutes later, they would come out crying. And then he would give them a $100 bill. So I know that he was molesting or abusing them. Now I hope this video isn't breaking up because it says poor connection right now. Oh, there it went. So I hope this video isn't choppy. So one time that I remember in Virginia is I had a friend across the street where he lived. Now, the street I remember was like a catacomb. You go down the street and then there's a circle at the end. My friend lived across from that. And he got him, played with him, and was my best friend at the time. So then my grandfather molested him. Actually, he made me watch him, and he basically had a knife. He pulled out like a really big knife. Now, when you're a kid, size can be different to what you remember. But he pointed at me and he said, "You're gonna watch." And he went to my friend. He said, "If you tell anyone, I kill Jesse. Jesse, if you tell anyone, I kill him." And he said, "I have other ways of killing your mother and your father. So you will be rewarded after you do what I want you to do." So when he did this to my friend, I had to watch. My friend never reported it, but he never came back to the house. He never wanted to hang out with me. He somehow blamed me for what happened. That was probably when I was about 8, when he started having these parties for connection again. Well, so other things, like I said, a lot of things going from my head. Trying to remember everything. There was times too, well, basically, when he would have sex with me too at nighttime, if there was a thunderstorm, he would really wake me, It was covered by the thunder. And again, my dad was heavy medicated because my dad had schizophrenia. And he was usually asleep when this happened. And my grandfather would do to me stuff during the thunderstorms. So today, I get flashbacks when I go into the shower. I mean, if I had a tub when I moved into this house, when I got the house. I had to take the tub out and put a shower in, a walk-in shower, because to this day I cannot get in a tub because, and a shower is even not as bad, but still. So let me collect my thoughts here. Well, anyhow, the thunderstorm thing. He would do that with thunderstorms. Like, do that when thunderstorms happen. And if I did not comply because I tried fighting him back when I got older, if I did not comply, he would throw me down, take his belt off, and this, no, this is a very bad connection. I hope this isn't choppy. He would take his belt and literally whip me with it on my stomach, on my back, and should have been marks, but I don't know. He got by it somehow. I mean, there was still marks, but he did it smartly enough not to leave them as bad. More like how they do with someone where you take a bar of soap, you wrap it up in a sock, whatever, and you hit someone with it. It's not going to leave a mark, but it hurts a cow. He did body shots, which would not leave marks. So, from the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure how he was able to do this without leaving bruises on me. I don't know, that's just blocked away in my memory. And I do know every time he would take me to a doctor, he would pay for the service himself in cash, and also give the doctor a $200 tip, plus pay $500 for the appointment. And this stuff happened back in the 80s and early 90s. Now, this went on when I was 9, I got the courage to tell my father about what was happening. Well, before this, I forgot to mention, my grandmother at all those times would tell my grandfather to take me in the room and show me what a real man is. I have no idea what rape has to be with doing with a real man. And she was sick too. They were, can't think of the word. It's when bipoxy, I think. When you are always saying you're sick and you go to the hospital to get stuff. Well, it's the reverse. It's when the parents or grandparents take you to the hospital always to get you medicine. Well, they mainly worked with the gastroenterologist, the specialist that my grandfather had paid off to get stool softeners. And for some reason, they had a fascination with that. My grandmother did. She would pick it up and feel it to see how hard it was and stuff. She was fucked up. So I remember too, one time, well, can't remember. Yeah, one time before I told my dad, I think I was about 8, I used to love to be on the roof, going on roofs and stuff, and I just like hanging out up there. One day, for a funny story, my dad heard humming coming from the chimney, so he kicked it to see what was up there, and it was like a ton of wasps came running out of there, and he freaking ran, and he's like, "Get down the ladder, boy!" I wasn't going fast enough, and he was getting stung, so he basically hopped off like halfway down the ladder. But then what ruined that for me was I was on the roof one day, and I was on the top of the roof, and my grandfather pushed me, made me go like I was gonna go flying off the roof, and then grabbed me by my collar and slammed me down to the floor and dragged me up. And he said, "See how fucking fast I can kill you and your mom?" Because at nighttime, during rain, because my dad and mom had 50-50 custody, and then eventually just went to weekends, but I'll get into that. During nights, especially stormy, rainy nights or during a storm, it was always dark and it was always raining. I remember that. He took that knife and he would tap on the window, because my bedroom had a window and my bed was against it. And so he would tap on the window and then take his knife and go like this. He was supposed to do that, and he would take the knife and go like that. And when I would see him, he would say, "I can easily kill your mom and your dad, where I would have full custody of you, and you would be mine." And he did try killing my mom a couple times. My mom won't tell me all the details, but she went through hell trying to get full custody of me. But basically, with my mom, she told me that the brakes were not working her vehicle, and so she took it to the repairman. She survived, thank God. But this happened a few times. Her car kept getting messed with, and the mechanic said that this had been done by someone who knows vehicles. Now, my grandfather worked for a motor company, and so he would know how to do it. So now we'll go back to the story. When I got the guts to tell my dad, I was about 9, like I said, and we were coming home from breakfast from Hardee's that we always went to because my grandparents are so rich that they barely ever cooked, hardly ever. And before my grandfather got there, and we were going in the house from the back, from the garage, I told him, I said, Dad, Pop, that's what I called him, has been messing with me and haunting me. And he said, what do you mean? I went, well, he's, I couldn't really explain it at that age. I was very confused. And he was like, is he putting anything inside you? And I said, yes. And then he flipped out on him when he walked into the garage. This is early 90s, late 80s, something like that. So he rolled in the garage. My dad stormed off, started breaking the windows with his fist, broke the windshield trying to grab him, broke the side window where he was driving at. He was running around the car till he ran into the house, locked the door to go in the house. My dad kicked it in, chased him, and he was saying, you fucking asshole, you told me you would never do to him what you did to me. And so my dad was sexually abused by him. And basically they called the cops, and the cops came, and back then child support wasn't really worth much. Also, especially a person with a mental illness. Now, hold on, I gotta take a drink. It's been a while. Sorry about that. Mouth gets dried out talking about this. Anyhow, the police came, and my grandfather showed him the damage, and said that my dad was off his medication. He's schizophrenic. So they were asking this, talking about it in the living room. So I didn't want to be there. I was scared of my grandfather. So I went into my dad's room and was in there on the bed. So the cops come back there. My dad is there. My grandfather, my dad is in behind the police. It's hard to remember, but I do remember my grandfather being there. Him taking a knife. Not a knife. He didn't have a knife on me. Sorry. He basically, pointing at me, being behind the police, and he went like that to me. And that scared me. You're thinking about a little kid for like 2-3 years. Every time it rained, he would come and knock on the window with a freaking knife. This is a big freaking knife to me. So they asked me, is your grandfather doing anything to you? And he scared the crap out of me. So I said no. So they took my dad away in handcuffs. And he was drugged up for the rest of his life. So this made it easier that since my dad slept a lot, it made a more advantage to get to me. But after that incident, he took me to my bedroom and basically hit me and stuff. And he went to the drawer beside my bed inside a brown box. He lifted it up, and there was a gun with the clips beside it. He picked up the gun. I remember it being diamond plated on the side. I did look it up, and it was Army. It was a P220. I don't know, I forget. Basically a gun that they used during Vietnam. And my grandfather got away with not being drafted because he paid them off not to draft him. Or he got a cushy little seat. I think he did code there, but they just had him in like a very low class that he stayed in American soil. My great uncle, however, did go to Vietnam. Well, anyhow, that's how I think he got the gun from my uncle. Now, my grandfather did keep a lot of guns, shotguns, other guns like that, which he never really threatened me with that. This is the first time he threatened me with a gun. Well, he pulled it out. He said, "Look at this." And then he slammed the gun together, loaded the gun, cocked it back, and put it to my forehead. He said, "If you ever fucking do this again, I will blow your head off. And I will make you, I will make sure before I do this that your father's dead. And I will make you watch. Because he's sleeping all the time. He's doped up. I could easily kill him. And after I kill you, I'll kill your mother." So he said, "Get on your knees." With the gun pointed to my head. And made me give him oral sex. It's important to know that when you are late, sometimes the body reacts to sex. I mean, it's just a natural reaction. Because sometimes during sex, I would, achieve a hard on or something like that. It's very hard to say because many people think, "Oh, then you liked it." No, I did not like it. It was this stimuli. Even for women, they're all late and they have an orgasm or something. It is not the fault. It was this natural thing that happens. So anyhow, getting back to the gun. So my grandma was always watching anyhow. Whenever he did something, she was watching. Except he still had parties all the time. I mean, for the kids in the neighborhood. So he kept taking females back and males, but he mainly focused on males. Because females, it's easier to tell if they were sexually abused or not. Guys, it's not that easy to tell. But you do have signs of sexual abuse. But having that knife to the throat all the time in the windows, tapping on it, that's emotional abuse. And also, when he would physically assault me, that's physical abuse. When he would rape me or molest me, that's sexual abuse. So basically, I got 3 out of 4. The fourth one being neglect. So, at this time, only in this time, my grandmother was starting to show signs of Alzheimer's. So I was about I think 11, and so they moved to North Carolina. Before they moved to North Carolina, my mom and me, when I was about shortly after, I would say when I was about 9 or 10, shortly after I told about my what happened to my dad, me and my mom were seeing the therapist and stuff, and we decided to move out of state. I was probably 9 or 10 when we did that, and we moved to Pennsylvania, where my mom's family was. And around that time in Virginia, my grandmother was starting to show signs of early Alzheimer's. So my grandfather decided to move to North Carolina to live there, where the Hillcuts are. Now, the Hillcut family, they're very abusive to each other, but I'm not going to go into it. And when I go there, they treat me like I'm retarded. They don't believe any of the sexual abuse. I even talked to Bonnie one time in the car, and he said, I do believe you, which was my great uncle. But he said, we do not mention that stuff in the South. You do not talk about it because you disgrace the family. Now, that was my grandfather's brother. And when I was there, I didn't really like being there. My dad would start leaving the house all the time. So in North Carolina, he would just mainly watch me take showers and fill me up sometimes, and I would do things to him. And then when he had to come visit me, it got to the point my mom was going to drive up there anymore. It was too much. So then he started driving down to Selinsgrove, where I lived at the time, in Pennsylvania, and he would drive up there, pick me up, and drive back to North Carolina in one day. Actually, he was doing this in Virginia when I was up in Pennsylvania. The only reason my grandfather was able to see me so much was because of my dad. My dad was eventually granted, my mom got full custody basically, but he could see me like twice a month or something, or once a month, and it was during weekends. So he would come down from Virginia, mainly just Virginia, when I was like 10, and he would pick me up and we would drive the whole way back that very night to his house. And then he did it a couple times. Basically at this point, when he was living in North Carolina, he couldn't do it no more, make that trip from North Carolina to Pennsylvania and back. So basically he rented a room in a hotel. Now, that hotel room I still remember to this day. And I want to destroy that hotel. But it's not the hotel's fault. Every time I see it, I want to burn it down. I asked other people, hey, would you burn that building down for me? My one aide that I have, she tells me that it's not the building's fault, or the people in there, it's not their fault. Because when I was in there, he would have my dad go get breakfast. and bring it back. And while my dad was alone, he would instead of using the knife anymore to threaten me into doing stuff, he always had that damn gun. He always wore it. So basically, he would force me to do stuff by gunpoint. He didn't want to risk any more of penetrating me. So basically, it became molestation, mainly. Sometimes it was penetration. But then when he moved to North Carolina, he could not basically drive that far anymore, and my grandmother was farther alone in her Alzheimer's. So, hold on a minute. Alzheimer's divorce. And she was the one that always told him to do it. Now, she started, like I said, slow to develop in Virginia. And when the reason he moved to North Carolina was because she basically burnt the kitchen down one night, caught the whole kitchen on fire, and he had to pay to get the whole kitchen redone. And that's when she really started to lose it. So he figured to move to North Carolina where the hookups are, so it's more family, what his family is. So anyhow, when that happened, my dad could see me maybe since he was so far away, basically he would see me once a month or twice, and once every 2 to 3 months. So my dad really did love me, and he missed me so much. So when we were in North Carolina, like I said, he would leave a lot of the time to, I don't know what he did, but he would just leave for hours on end. Early in the morning, he would leave like at 5, and he wouldn't come back till like 2 or 3. And that gave my grandfather opportunities. By this time, I was 12 or 13 years old. So he was getting more feeble. And he was pissed off because my grandmother would not watch him do anything to me anymore. She was basically not the same mind. So she would basically, sleep a lot in the bed. And she started to have accidents, like peeing herself and stuff. So, again, I remember this house. There was a torn door. It basically was like the same hallway that the Virginia house looked like. There was a bathroom on the left-hand side. Then there was my room, which my grandfather called my special room, which was on the right side. And then we kept going. My grandparents' room was on the left. My dad's room was on the right. So then, he wouldn't really do much because I could basically overpower him at this time. And the very last thing he did to me in North Carolina was, I don't know how he did it, but he drugged me. And I remember I was taking a shower, and I don't remember much after that. I remember coming to and on the bed, laid out with a towel under me, and there was blood. So by this time, I told my mom what was going on all these years. So Chittering Youth got involved. Unfortunately, the main abuse happened in Virginia. So the main abuse happened in Virginia. And then the abuse happened in Pennsylvania and also in North Carolina. Now, I would have had to charge him in 3 different states. And when he was defending these charges, Pennsylvania put him up with charges of sexual molestation. Because I did not mention, I was still scared to mention the penetration, which was a big fuck up on my point. Basically, my grandfather came into the Pennsylvania. We had an attorney which became a judge. He was pretty popular attorney. He wasn't cheap, but my mom did what she could. And my dad was there at the courthouse, my grandmother, and my dad was really, really sad. I remember that. And basically, after he came in, my grandfather, with 6 attorneys that were 3-piece attorneys, really rich, popular attorneys. 6 of them. So you tell me, if you're innocent, why would you have 6 very high-priced attorneys? So, since there was no physical evidence of this, except they did have some, I forgot how all this went around. A lot of it I can't remember. But I do remember him being put on Megan's Law list. This was probably, I don't know if Megan's Law list was out when I was basically 14, because pedophiles, when I was in North Carolina, the last time he did something to me was when he drugged me. When I was in North Carolina, that was the last incident that happened, because pedophiles do not like when a child hits puberty, because they want children. They don't want, people that go through puberty. So basically, with this, he was put on some kind of law, and this was in the 90s. So I think Megan's Law list was around that then, but he had to register as a sex offender. Which, because of this, I had to see my dad without them being there. But they were there anyhow. So to see my dad, I basically had to see my grandfather. Now by this point, them living in North Carolina, he wouldn't do anything more to me, because he knew I could knock his ass on the ground. He tried when I was 14, and I just grabbed him, pushed him on the floor. And I did not like going on in North Carolina. And like I said, when I went to North Carolina, the family thought I was retarded and treated me as a child. And my great uncle, which would be my grandfather's uncle, told me that about he was sexually abused in the family, and my grandfather was, and basically that's what I got out of it. So the sexual molestation, physical abuse, mental abuse on the Hillcutt side of the family must have ran for many years. Because one night when I was with Vonnie, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself here. My grandmother basically, my dad was losing weight. Okay, and my dad had a heart attack, and he fell to the floor. My grandfather called 911, and before this happened, my dad went to the ER for chest pains, and my grandfather said, since it was a big ass line, and he could have just easily went up there and said, I'm having chest pains, and he would have been taken back. But there was a lot of people in the line, so my grandfather was just like, come on, we're leaving. So my dad left. That is what I heard, you know. So basically, my dad came home and he had a heart attack, and he died. Basically, he was pronounced DOA, dead on arrival, basically, but they were able to restart his heart, but they had a very weak pulse. So when they got him in the hospital and fixed everything, all his arteries to his heart was basically closed off, or they had very little narrow spaces for it. And so with that, it was when I was at the hospital to see him, they gave me the opportunity to say, well, you're next. My grandmother and grandfather wanted to keep him on life support. And he was brain dead. There was no recovery. The doctor said there's no chance of him ever recovering. He's brain dead. And the machine's the only thing keeping him alive. So I know my dad would not want that. So I told him to take him off the machine. I got slapped by my grandmother, and she said, you do not have the right to make that choice. And the doctor said, yes, he does. He's next in kin. He is his son. You know, that's his father in now. So I made the decision to pull the plug. Now, my grandmother was at full-blown Alzheimer's. And since my grandfather, I never came around when my dad died, I was not coming around the Hillcuts. Maybe my mom and I would drive up there once in a great moon to see Vonnie, because I really liked Vonnie. But we would stay in the hotel, but my grandfather and no one were there, so he was very feeble, so I felt no threat to him. Anyhow, it's very hard to explain that he was my abuser for many years, but still, I loved him and I hated him, if you know what I mean. So, when we would go, my grandmother would start pooping and peeing herself and on the couch all the time, and he got pissed off about that and would yell at her all the time, why are you doing this? And stuff like that. And when she took us, we were out there for, at the restaurant for, dinner one day, and he was yelling at her across the table, she said, well, what do I eat? He's like, look at the fucking menu and choose what you want to eat. And she said, I can't. And he slammed the table, and he got in her face. And it was just, that's how he treated her. So, basically, the state came in, and they removed my grandmother from the house. Now, my grandfather saw her every day, and of course he acted like the perfect person. And again, I should have mentioned in the earlier videos, my grandfather was loved in the community. But inside doors, was a different story. And, basically, before, my dad passed away, he had a position at a church as a assistant youth pastor. And that was scary. So I called the North Carolina Police Department and told him his name and that he was supposed to be on the sexual assault list. And he looked it up and he said, yes, he is. He never registered. So he went to jail for a couple of days and got out because, he's extremely rich. And also, he used to buy cars, like a new car, like every 6 months, he would buy a new car. And he bought all this in cash. So it was never ever paper trail. And you can tell he was very rich to have like that much money. But anyhow, just to go back to my grandmother, when my grandmother was taken away, actually, when I was there, my grandfather would verbally abuse my dad. I would see it. Like, he would always be pissed at him and yelling at him. So basically, I think my dad was emotionally and sexually abused. But with my grandmother being taken to a nursing home on the Alzheimer's unit, my grandfather was basically going to see her all the time. And then one day, they estimated, like, my grandfather died. It was estimated. Oh, well, first of all, I'm sorry. First of all, my dad died that day. I told you about he died. And I pulled the plug. Like I said, I'm gonna jump around here. Then he had my grandmother to attack. Not only did he and my father do abused, he had my grandmother. And he would slap her sometimes when she had accidents and make her scrub it up, and she had no idea what was going on. So he was able to abuse her till they were reported about the abuse, which was me. And then they took her away. But before this part, jumping back, after my dad died, there was a funeral I attended. Of course, I put a picture of me in his pocket, and he was buried. Now, my grandfather, being as rich as he is, never gave him a headstone. He just had a little plaque was dug in the grave. And then his grave caved in. When I would visit his grave sometimes, it caved in. And my grandfather never paid any money to fix it. So, going back, my grandfather always visited my grandmother. And, like that. And then he died one day, my grandfather. He approximately died at time of death was around, I think they said 5 a.m. And someone must have came knocking at his door, and he opened up the door, and the report said no money was taken, and he did have money on him, like he always did. Money wasn't touched. He was stabbed in the carotid artery, in the throat, like right here, and then stabbed in the heart. And there was blood everywhere on the crime scene. And of course, the Hillcuts tried to cover it up, saying that he just hit his head on the concrete and that's what made him die. There's no way you would have so much blood. So basically, they looked into it as a homicide, and they cannot find any evidence. The knife was gone. So it's like, the only way, like my therapist said too, it probably was a parent of someone that he sexually abused, a child, or it was someone that he sexually abused that they tracked him down and killed him. Now, karma's a bitch. When he died, I did not go to his funeral. I have not shredded a tear over him dying yet. And when he died, even the family, and they had the family's witch, they didn't have a tombstone for his fucking grave. So he had a little plaque beside my dad. And eventually my grandmother was in the state that she just mumbled, couldn't really talk, slept mainly all the time. So she passed away with dementia and Alzheimer's. And I inherited the rest of the money. And they asked me if I wanted to pay for a headstone for her. I was like, no. So they gave her a little plaque on the grave. So son of a bitches got what they deserved. And to finish this up, I want to say, if you have ever been sexually abused at any point in your life, or someone is touching you in the wrong spot, and you feel something's inappropriate or you're scared, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Tell someone you really trust. Go to the police. Go to your parent, which you love. These pedophiles will threaten you and do whatever they can. The reason they're doing that is because they're scared to death that you're going to tell someone and they're going to get in trouble. So, I forgot to mention a while back with my grandmother and him. I think I said this before already, but I'm not sure, that he was the leader of a youth. Yeah, I did talk about that, never mind. So, when all this happened and it was all done and finished, I would come up and visit Vonnie. Vonnie was a great guy, but the violence in the Hillcuts family is this unbelievable violence. I remember walking in to Vonnie's son's house with his wife, and she was beaten, you could tell, and bleeding, and Mike was bleeding and beat up, and she was ranting and stuff to Vonnie, and Vonnie, of course, is losing his hearing, and she's like, he was out having sex with a hooker like he usually does. She's like, you don't want to know what your son does. he's out having sex with hookers. So, and then Mike would always accuse her because she would date other men. And then he would beat her up. And then if he was having sex with a prostitute, she would beat him up. So it was a physically abusive relationship. And I told my mom this when I went back to the hotel. And she's like, don't get involved. You know, that's what it was like in the Hillcutt family. So then they had 2 children, Jay and Joey. Joey now has a stepdaughter and a son. Now I hope to God that they are still that nothing that they didn't pass that violence to Joey. I'm praying that Joey does not turn out like them. Or Jay. So basically that's it. And again, if you are being sexually abused, remember, it is not your fault at all. Okay? Now you all have a good night.